Welcome everybody to Product Week, an event designed to help you level up your PM skills and career. This event is powered by ADPList, the biggest peer-to-peer learning platform in the world. If you want to learn, get mentored from the best tech talents in the world, discuss ideas and network, ADPList is the perfect match for you. We are 100% free. In the PM week, you get a chance to win an Apple Watch. For Product Week, we're giving away an Apple Watch, kindly sponsored by Product Academy. All that you have to do is share what you have learned from our sessions on LinkedIn and Twitter. Tag our speaker and ADPList. Details will be shared in the chat section for you to know all the details of how you can join. Now, some housekeeping rules. For us to run the session smoothly, please keep your cameras on at all times. Please use your real names on Zoom and Slido. Presentation will be 30 minutes, followed up by a 15-minute Q&A. For the Q&A, we are using Slido to manage questions, so please scan the QR code behind me or click the link in the chat where you can ask all of your burning questions. Please remember to send the questions with your name, since anonymous questions will not be considered. You can also upvote each other's questions on Slido for our speaker to respond. This session will be recorded and we will share it after the session. Whenever it is available, you will be notified. So for today, we have Andrew. Andrew is Senior Product Manager, and he will be talking to us about what it's like to be a rebel. The rebel product manager break those rules. So Andrew is, as I said, in the UK. We are super happy to have you with us today. And I'm just going to read your bio real quickly before we start.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah. Andrew is a senior product manager at Booking.com, a rebel by nature. Andrew has been successfully creating innovative outcomes with his teams for 10 plus years. Diagnosed with dyslexia in school, Andrew was forced to find new ways to solve problems as the standard institutional model didn't work for him. After leaving school with okay outcomes, Andrew then spent his 20s realizing that he was able to learn and master his intelligence by applying a rebel mindset to his pathway. This led Andrew to a successful career in product management, working for major brands and institutions, and some of the finest people to deliver major impact and innovations. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to you, Andrew. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're super happy to have you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks. What a great introduction. First, I think thank you very much for having me, and I'm really excited to take this opportunity to share a little bit of my story, but also some of the learnings that I've had along that pathway. So I'm going to share my screen quickly, if that's okay. Bear with me 2 seconds.
Go for it. I'll let you know when we can see it. Loading.
Yeah. So.
And there you go. Perfect.
There we are. Okay, great. So yeah, like we said, my name is Andrew Howe. I've coined myself the rebel product manager, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to go on a little bit of a journey to start with. I'm going to talk through sort of how I got into product management and tell a little bit of that story around, the school years through and why they were really important in understanding how I ended up being a product manager and how I utilized those learnings to be able to drive through to what I do now. So going back just a little bit into the bio, I sort of went to school. I never really fit in from an education perspective. It was clear that I had some learning difficulties around dyslexia, spelling, sort of reading and writing. But I was really good at anything that sort of creative or whether I could get tangibly onto something. So if it was like doing or there was a physical element to it, then I excelled really well. But I did really well as well in sciences. But the challenge was always the dyslexia. And because of people's biases to dyslexia at the time, it meant that people who didn't know how to manage me as a person to enable me to be able to unlock my intelligence. So I learned a lot of lessons which were quite hard at that point. I failed quite a lot, and I left school at 17, sort of with some qualifications, but not as many as I probably would have liked. And I ended up in the military. So I spent then 3-4 years in the military, which was another learning experience, completely different environment. But that institution had to understand how to teach people from lots of different backgrounds with different challenges. And actually that gave me a platform to learn. And I actually came out of the military with the equivalent of a US high school diploma, or in the UK, what we call A-levels, which enabled me to go to university. So I learned a lot during those periods about how to nurture my inner intelligence, but also the fact that actually rules didn't apply very well to me when it came to learning. The standard way of learning that most people go through, that doesn't work for me. And I realized very early on that I needed to think outside the box. I needed to push the boundaries a little bit and find either other people with a similar problem that have already solved it and see if I can learn from them, or to find my own way through. And also another learning that happened that point was that people were telling me that I couldn't do things. There was a lot of negativity. A lot of people believed that the dyslexia that I had would stop me from ever really excelling in certain fields, such as business or maths or whatever, base subjects or so on. So, that also fired up something in me, which I don't like being told I can't do something. It fires up, and I sort of then spend a lot of effort proving that I can do it for myself and to prove other people wrong as well. So these are all sort of things that were inherently built into me through the experiences that I took during those early years of developing as a young person into my 20s. And then I went to university and sort of decided, hey, I want to do something completely different, because I've been stuck in these institutions that don't work for me and I want to be really creative. So I decided at that point that music was something I loved during school. So I went and did a degree in music, and then realized that that level of creativity was too much. It was too free, and I wasn't able to apply myself properly. So I made another learning about, actually, as much as I like to push the boundaries and I think differently and I can utilize my intelligence to come up with innovative ways of doing things, if I have too much freedom or not enough clear scope on things and focus, then it can almost become a negative as well. So I found those learnings really interesting. And while I was at university, and this is how I got into product management, by the way. I was at university and I was working in a call center selling newspaper subscriptions, which was interesting in itself, because obviously learning how to sell and what customers would say to you and so on. But I was on the floor, and one of the managers stopped everyone and said, "Does anyone know how to use Excel here?" And I put my hand up and I said, "Yeah, that's me. I can use Excel." I'd never used Excel properly in my life. I just saw an opportunity to get off of the phones and do something more interesting. So I put my hand up. He said, "Right, I want you to look at these data sheets and bring up a little bit of a view of this." And I basically went home and taught myself how to use Excel overnight, and then came back the next day and then just sort of applied everything I'd learned and then put something together. But I had a natural flair for taking data and drawing out insights, and I also could very quickly see certain traits or sequences within data that allowed me to sort of identify findings, opportunities that other people couldn't see. And again, I put that down to my ability, my dyslexia, and the fact that maybe I think slightly differently to others in some ways. So anyway, that led on from there to doing sort of more heavy data analysis. I taught myself SQL. I then started doing report building. I then used that as well and got interested in market analytics. So I did sort of market-driven analysis. That led on to business analysis, because at the time, business analysis was a hot role. And then I got my first product role roughly 10 years ago. That's where it all sort of kicked off. And then I found that because I really had this ability to generalize, do really well at bringing all these different things together, that product was a natural place for me to then apply that ability to drive myself. So that's sort of the journey that I took, and the one thing I find from that journey is that there are plenty of other people in product management that have gone through that sort of experience where they maybe haven't done it as an MBA or a degree and then fallen into it, which is a completely fine route into product management as well, but maybe found their own route in and gone through a different route. And I think one of the great things about product management is that we need people from lots of different backgrounds with different experiences to create that diversity, so that we can build these great products and that change people's lives and move things forwards. So I think just a little bit of a background on that, and I learned also a lot of things about myself. And one of the big things in realization around the word rebel, and why that felt like a natural fit for me, was when I understood how I thought better. I had a better concept of that, and that came through doing a bit of this stuff. So self-awareness. So I spent a lot of time trying to understand who I am, and that is always changing. Different experiences impact the way that I think, and that can change the way I think, or it could evolve the way I think. New information, new knowledge can change that. So, but there are some things that are fundamentally hard-coded. And I found the chimp paradox was a great framework. I read that book at the time. It really laid out a way of me understanding, the emotional side of my brain, the human, the logical side, and how I was hardwired in regards to the way that I thought around things. So that was a really big learning point, and I became a lot more self-aware after this and a number of other things, including emotional intelligence, which was another big read on my part, where I read that book, and again, it helped me understand myself, but also how others interact with each other. And through all these sort of I have a natural curiosity to learn. I'm really interested in sort of philosophy and these sort of self-development type genres of reading. And through reading all these things, you realize a lot about yourself, even into some stuff I've read on psychology. There's a book called The Denial of Death. And again, another really interesting read that sort of helps you understand what drives us as a society through the basic things that we've created, whether that be science, religion, culture, and so on. So all these things, and I know I'm going really wide here, but all these things sort of play into who you are, right, as an individual. And for me, this led me to this finding this theory by Dr. Helen Taylor, which is basically the theory of complementary cognition. And what that basically is that we, over millions and millions of years, humans, over a long period of time, nature has evolved, and we have to realize that we have evolved with nature, right? So during the period of our existence, the way that we've evolved physically, but we also evolved cognitively. And this theory is basically about the fact that humans have evolved into different groups of thinkers. She terms it as cognitive search, but thinkers. And those thinkers all are basically a puzzle. And you need all of those thinkers within coming together to form the collective thought around how humanity moves. And if we all thought the same way, then when we were presented with things that may cause us harm in our past, we would have had the same outcome. And if one of those thinkers was an outcome that led us to not exist anymore, then we would all have not existed. And the question is have we evolved into these different sort of types of thinkers to help with our survival and our development as we move forward as a race, right? So it's really interesting to me, because I think about myself as a dyslexic person and also as a product manager, and I think that I'm a piece of the puzzle, right? But my specific USP as a product manager is that I'm a little bit of an out-of-the-box thinker. And I tend to like to try and push the boundaries of things a lot more than some of my peers, but also then some of my peers are better at task management and driving things through because I'm quite strategic in the way that I think. So the core thing around this is that we all have different strengths and weaknesses. And actually, if you think about what your strengths are, then you can bring those to the table. But the one thing about being rebellious is that we all have a little bit of a rebel in us, right? We're not all, cherubs. We're not all angels. We always have a little bit of a rebellious side to ourselves. So the question then becomes, okay, well, how do we harness some of these things that maybe sit outside our natural thinking to maybe evolve the way that we think about problems? But also, how do we bring that into product management and drive a different way or a different approach to thing, or enable other thinkers within our teams, our product teams, or our product spaces to bring some of that thinking to the table, right? So what makes up a rebel? This is not a rebel in the classic term of what we probably know. If you go to the dictionary, it's going to give you something very revolutionary. And it's going to talk probably about governments and action and things like this. Some of those things are transferable, right? Rebels, I believe, are action orientated. They want to take action. They want to solve problems. They want to execute things to drive outcomes. But then the one thing as a rebel in the term of product rebel is you have to be really careful about the line. And we'll touch on that a little bit shortly. But what makes up a rebel? Well, it can be very wide, but there are some things for me that really I have almost set a set of values when I'm thinking in that rebel mindset that keep me not just on the straight and narrow and make sure that I'm doing things in a certain way, in the right way, but also make sure that I'm thinking about diving into those spaces that are really important when it comes to that. So, okay, let's have a look at those things. So for me, there's 4 things. Curiosity, right? Let's start there. Curiosity is like fundamental. Just in product management in general, right? We have to be curious by nature. You don't find great outcomes with your teams if you aren't curious, right? It just doesn't happen. So the curiosity thing is really important for anyone in product, not just if you want to be a rebel, right? So having that really that pillar is really important for me, and I'm constantly always looking to feed my curiosity, right? And that's thinking about the why, right? What is the why? Why are we doing this? Why is this bit important? Why is that more important than this thing? Why are customers saying this? The why is always at the base of that curiosity, and that's why it's the first one in the list. And there's plenty of other people out there that talk about why. Simon Sinek talks about why all the time. Talk about whys, not whats, right? What's, you can find a million whats, but finding the right why, really hard, really hard. And, you know, I think Albert Einstein said, you know, if you ask me a question, I'll spend 55 minutes thinking about if it's the right question and then 5 minutes on the answer, right? So I think that curiosity side of being about being a product manager is really important. Where the rebellious element of the curiosity comes in is diving into things that maybe other people might not think. So, for example, talking about practice innovation and craft innovation. Okay, I got this tool. This is how this tool works, right? This is the tool that I'm using. But actually this tool has rules, right? It restricts me to do certain things. It restricts me from being able to go this way or that way. Okay, well, what happens if I get rid of this tool? What happens if I start thinking about the where I want to be, where I am, and how I want to get there? What's the whys and how are we building that up? Where the outcomes, what are the opportunities? Does the tool work anymore? No, the tool doesn't work anymore. Right, well, the tool's no good. I'm just going to go and build this out because this is the right way to do things. So that curiosity drives the innovation from the get-go. The second one, positivity. I know a lot of people talk about product managers being very cynical. And I think there is an element of truth to that to a certain extent. But really, the cynical side of things is about, it's really about making sure you're doing the right thing, right? You're doing the right thing and you're being analytical and critical of things in a positive way. And again, I just said it, it comes back to positivity, right? If you have an idea, if your team has, your product team or you as a product manager have found something during that curiosity phase and you really like believe in it, you need to make other people believe in it as well, because it's not probably just going to happen just because you found it. And this is where positivity is really important, because if you're trying to innovate, whether it's the product, the practice, the craft, you're pushing the boundaries, you're challenging, you know, the strategy, or you're thinking about things in a different way, you've really got to believe in what you've got to do, because you've got to tell that story to someone, and you really need to evangelize things here. You know, Guy Kawasaki has always spoken about how Apple, when they believed in something, they really believed in it. You know, everyone evangelized it, especially him, and went around being very clear about what they were trying to do, and the why was the leading part of that. And again, you know, in these companies that have driven innovation, you see this very clearly, that there's a positive mindset about the things that they do. They're confident that they're doing things the right way, and they're pushing the boundaries, and they're innovating, and they're leading the market, right? And that leads really nicely onto the next thing, which is perseverance. You know, if you really evangelize something, you found something, you think it's the next innovation in X, right? You're positive that you've done the right thing. You believe in yourself, no matter what other people are saying. You need to then persevere, right? And there's a story that goes around from booking.com of a guy who basically was carrying a load of data around the office, telling people about this thing, and he just kept on telling them, and that led to a major innovation, right? But people weren't listening to him at the start. It took all of that perseverance to get the story and the information and the right things in front of people to drive that outcome. So again, perseverance is really important, and you may be persevering against the flow of things. So, you know, you could be, everyone else is saying you go this way, and you're saying, no, I want to go this way, and these are the reasons why. And, you know, that's going to raise some eyebrows. People may not like the fact that you're challenging the norm. And again, this is where the perseverance as a rebel really comes into play, especially in product management. And then humility is in there because it's very easy to persevere, to be positive, to be curious, but then to lead, for them things to lead down the wrong path. And being a rebel product manager isn't about being rebellious to the point of breaking the law or breaking your policies at work, or you know, anything that is pushing over that line. And also the fact that you need to be you're humanizing things as well, right? Thinking about things in a positive way, and also how about where they go and how do they affect the people around you, right? And trying to take people on board that journey. When you're creating innovation or you're trying to do things differently, it's much easier if you do it as a team. So I think the humility part is really important in balancing and anchoring yourself as a product manager, to make sure that when you're doing all these great things, that you don't forget about the customer, you don't forget about your team, you don't forget about any other person that's involved in that process, right? So that's, for me, is the four sort of key pillars of what being a rebel product manager is. And they're things that we've probably all seen, or maybe I'm hoping that people see a natural connotation to some of these things. They do some of these things already. The rebel part really is about how do you push the boundary and utilize these things to drive past and be that leader of the curve within the market or the product or with the teams that you're working with. Look, I'm going to move on now to a couple of examples of some people that I think have been very successful at showing these sort of rebel product manager traits. So we're going to start with the classic. Oh, sorry, yeah, that's one quick thing. I just want to touch on that. Rebels are always asking questions, right? Going back to that curiosity thing, I ask loads of questions all the time, to the point where I know that I annoy some people with the number of questions that I ask. But I'd rather ask those questions because if I don't, then I'm leaving things up to chance, right? I'll walk away with the regret. And the question could be a direct question about something, or it could be questioning the whole thing around what are we doing, right? Why are we here? What's the goal? Where's the strategy? Okay, what does that mean? How do I apply that? You're saying you apply it in this way, but how am I applying it? And that constant questioning of myself, my environment, it is really important for me to, again, stay balanced and keep those pillars in place. Have I been persistent? Have I, been keeping up a positive mental attitude around this? Do I believe in it to be able to do that? Have I been humanizing things? And am I being curious still about it? These are all questions that you can ask when you're going through that, to bring yourself back down to that level. So look, Steve Jobs for me is the ultimate product manager in some respect. He coined the term "think different" back in, I think it's like the 80s or 90s, when Apple was going on that marketing campaign, because he knew all the way from the moment that he set out with Macintosh that he wanted to push what computing was and bring it to the masses, right? And to do that, you had to think outside the box. There's a great clip on YouTube where he's, it's like a Macintosh prototype, not functioning, of basically an iPad. And this was in the 80s. It was called the Macintosh Communicator, if I'm right? And it's amazing. You watch that video and you think, how many of the things that he was thinking about back then have become reality now, and how different a mindset were you in to generate those things and to build those concepts in your mind. and working with the others around you. It's not done in isolation, right? It's getting all those people to think outside the box and go, yeah, computers are these things where you print off and a roll comes out at the moment, but I want to create this thing that sits in the palm of your hand and you can video call someone. That's really pushing the boundaries and really trying to think differently. So curiosity and all the other things we've spoken about drive that. The next one is chalk and cheese character. We all know him, Mr. Elon Musk. Look, you have to be realistic about Elon Musk. He is a very good product manager. His hustle is unbelievable. But he is also track proven in breaking new ground, PayPal and all the things, SpaceX, really Tesla, these aren't just small changes that have had have generated revenue. These are products that are having an impact on how we as a society look at things. Tesla, EVs, SpaceX, the Mars mission, PayPal, online payments and the revolution there. So I really like this quote as well, from Elon, which, I think, again, there's quite a few from him that are out there. And again, these people that all have a sort of similar mentality when it comes to sort of thinking about problems and how it is. How does that work back to you? Well, the reality of it is it's about thinking, okay, well, how am I thinking like Steve Jobs? How am I pushing the boundaries? What am I doing to challenge myself, my team, or the product that I'm working with, or the space I'm working in to drive forwards, right? Be a leader, be a North Star within the market. So I think that the examples that I've just pulled up here, just to show that, there are many, many examples across the world of great product thinking. You can define them whenever you want, and you can harness the same powers, even if you don't end up building SpaceX, to build better things with your teams and your partners. And starting to challenge the way you think and being curious about that is the starting point. Elon Musk says something really interesting, which is you can learn anything for free. And that is true. And some of the biggest learnings that you will make about yourself, I definitely feel that's been true for me, right? So look, just some learnings then. Big one for me is about empowering our differences. This one for me goes back to school and about the fact that if we all think the same way, we'll get the same outcomes, right? There's no ifs or buts about that. And we'll see who says that again in a minute. But, we have to be able to get different opinions, different thoughts, different things. You may come up with the idea, someone else may come up with the idea. You may not be the rebel in your team, that's fine. Someone else may have that rebellious mindset. Look at them, bring them in, make sure you've got a diverse select of people contributing to what you want to achieve as a product manager, because that's how you get great outcomes. Enable those rebels, whether it's yourself, you might have a whole team of rebels, which throws a complete the different challenge into the mix, because then you've got to manage all of those different, very challenging, different ways of thinking, right? But again, still doable. And also, you may not be the rebel, like I said, it may be someone else within your team. Enable them to be the person that leads the team to a new place, right? So again, enable the rebels that you see, onboard them. If they're not in your team, pinch them, get them to come and join your team, or learn from them, and so that you can challenge the way that you think about things. The third one is breaking the rules is not negative if it's done in the right way. And again, there are many examples out there of when people or companies have gone the wrong way. Elizabeth Holmes is a really good example. The tech entrepreneur, the biochem stuff, where she, basically defrauded many people out of a lot of money by saying that she had created an innovative product, but then it never materialized. And again, there are plenty of other organizations, banks, the global crash, many things, many ways of explaining that why you have to be really careful about the wrong way, but also the fact that if you're breaking rules or challenging rules, it isn't also a negative thing. Using it, if you go through a process and that's the process now, well, if you never challenge that process and the rules that confine that process, then you'll never move that process forwards, and someone else will challenge it, and then you'll end up playing catch up or dropping behind. And then again, product management's the same thing, around, what are you innovating? What are customers telling you? Challenge those things. So breaking the rules is not negative, but it needs to be done in the right way. Again, yeah, I think I mentioned this earlier. You can't solve problems with the same thinking that was used to create them. Albert Einstein, right? Great quote, and it's true. That's it. There's no other need to go into too much detail on that one, but that one with me always resonates with me. I always go back to it. I always think about it, and I always think about when I'm presented with opportunities as a product manager. I think about what's caused that. Where are we? What's the thinking behind this? Where's the why? Going back through those principles that we spoke about earlier. Curiosity. Do I believe that this is the right way to solve the problem based on asking those questions, and then going through that process again of getting to that place where we're hitting our innovation. No, I wanted to just talk about this book, which is another really, really good book. It's called The Rebel Talent. This one is going into a little bit more in-depth view of what rebellious people can do in different environments, and I think Francesca Gino has done an amazing job in showing the power of rebellion and thinking outside the box, all the way from world-class chefs to product like this, but yeah, and I think this is another book I definitely recommend people to read, because again, it will give you some insights into how what that really means. So I think, yeah, that's another big one for me. And look, just one thing I wanted to lastly mention, which is listen to your inner rebel. That rebel pops up now and again. He'll or she will or they will ask a question, and you'll ignore it. And actually, the challenge here is not ignoring it and becoming more attuned to actively listening to your inner rebel and to those questions that they ask. Because actually exploring those things can be really valuable. And if anything, even if from this, you may say, I'm never going to be a rebel. It's just not who I am, and that's fine. But the one thing you can do is then, when those questions pop up, just think, okay, well, maybe that's my rebel, and have a little listen, have a little think, get a little curious, ask the right questions, and see where it leads you. That's it. That's the talk. I hope this has been interesting and opened up some thinking, and maybe started to get you to think a little bit and ask some questions off the bat. But yeah, I really hope this has been useful. I'm really looking forward to seeing if there's any questions that follow on to this. This is a brand new talk, by the way, so this is the first time it's been rolled out, so I'm really interested to get some feedback from you all. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Super inspiring. I'm sure a lot of people in the chat watching, can identify. There are so many things that you shared that I'm, again, super inspiring. Just want to put that out there. We have questions on Slido. So
okay, great, awesome.
Let's go there. Let's make that happen. So here we go. Are we good? Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so let me just voice them out to you, okay? And the first one is from Aditya.
Mm.
And Aditya asks, can you share your experience of being rebellious that ended up in a positive outcome? Have you
Yeah.
ever crossed the line, and how did you manage that? Good one.
Yeah, it's a really good one, and the positive one's easy. The crossing the line one, I think I want to, but so positive outcomes. So it's hard. It's almost hard to pick actually, because actually once you get into a mindset of challenging things and asking why, it's actually a lot easier to find positive outcomes because you're asking the right. You get into down to asking the right questions. So I think there's quite a few examples of, one that jumps to mind is that we were in the process of looking at new products in a market. There was a very clear steer from the business that this wasn't the right way to go. The market didn't want this type of product. It's never had it before, and it would be a complete new entrant, and the customer just wouldn't be accepting of it. But we weren't. We just didn't believe that, and we went out and we asked the right questions. We sort of said, we talked to customers and we said, well, what is the reality of this? This is the context of what this product's going to do. This is what you're used to, but what does that mean to you? And everything for us was pointing towards the fact that that bias, that internal view of the reality of the market was incorrect. So we basically just plowed ahead and we took that product and we put it in the market, and it absolutely went off, right? It really hit home hard, and that bias was completely debunked. And also it basically meant that we had expanded our product set in the market and made an innovative step that the rest of the market were trading behind. And that all came from being a bit rebellious and saying to the business, no, you're wrong, and believing in and asking the right questions and getting down to the facts and talking to the customers, the humility side of things, and then being that positive perseverance element to drive it through. Have I ever got it wrong? We crossed the line. Yeah, of course we've got it wrong in some instances. Sometimes you think you're doing the right thing, the data's telling you you're doing the right thing, but actually it doesn't end up turning up into anything of material. Line crossing, I can't honestly say that I feel like I've ever really pushed it too far. I honestly don't think I have, and I think that's partly down to the fact that I've always humility is quite a driving value within me as an individual. So I think that making sure that I've got that balance, and also using other people to reference to make sure that we're not going into a bad place. Don't just be like, completely blinkered when we're doing things and just go, oh yeah, it's great, it's brilliant, this is definitely the right thing to do, and actually it being the wrong thing to do. So getting that real mix, that diverse set of thinking in place, coming back to that theory of cognitive cognition and complementary cognition, right? Really important, and use that as those guide rails to make sure you're not doing things the wrong way.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. I just wanted to voice one of the comments in the chat that said, felt just like a TED Talk, so inspiring. So I just wanted to voice that.
Awesome, thank you.
Next question we have is from Stephanie. And Stephanie asks, what happens if you have a new idea that you think can be the right product, but wrong time? What are your advices?
Yeah, so really interesting. Yeah, I think this comes down to how you map out your ideas, your opportunities, right? Wrong time's an interesting one. And I think that it'd be hard to know without knowing the constructs and the context of what we mean by wrong time and why that is the case. The first thing that jumps to my mind is what's driving the wrong time. Is it the fact that customer adoptions that likely to not happen because people aren't in the right mindset? Is it is it technology? Is it infrastructure? Is it feasibility? I think that it comes down to me on getting into the why really clearly and really validating if it is actually the wrong time. And what's the drivers of wrong time, and what are the costs of those drivers? Because the question becomes to me is if you've got a product or an idea that you think is the right thing for customers and potentially something of value, wrong time is a challenging one, because if you leave it too long, someone else might do it. So it comes a question of actually what do we mean by wrong time, and I drive into that in a lot more depth, and try and drive out what's driving that, and is that really the case.
Beautiful, thank you so much. The next question that we have is also from Stephanie. And Stephanie asked, you mentioned perseverance is one of the quality of a rebel product manager, but are there any signal indication when you should let go of an idea and move on?
Yeah, and this is a really good question, right? Perseverance is a great thing, right? Having the perseverance to see something through is great, but knowing when it's seen through is also a really important part of that as well. So for example, if you launch something and it loses millions of pounds and it's clear that customers don't want it, unless you've got some data that says, oh, you need to optimize something very clearly to make this a success, then really, the question then becomes, is this the right thing to do, and why should we even think about doing this anymore? And it comes back down to that why question. So I think that, yes, perseverance is really important, but also knowing when something's up is also really just as important. And again, failure is a big part of that. You learn through failure. Sometimes you get things right, sometimes you get things wrong. That may be, again, the same thing in perseverance. I persevered a little bit too long with this, so actually I know that next time I need to use those triggers or those warnings or red flags, whether that's other people, data, use those things to make sure that you're not pushing past that point. And your team should be telling you as well. But yeah, I sort of know, and I hope most people know, when you're going into something that you shouldn't do. And that's where we really got to check our egos, right? Ego is a really big thing. We have to be really careful about the difference between positivity and being egotistic around things. And that's something we have to keep in balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, going back to the humility point that you made earlier, I feel like, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question we have is from Beza. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. And they ask, can you train yourself to think rebelliously? What are some exercises you did to be able to think rebelliously?
Yeah, okay, really interesting. Great question again. Yeah, I think you can definitely train yourself to think rebelliously. It's as simple as when that little thought comes into your head that goes, well, why am I doing this? Or what's, someone may be like, you're looking at something and, you're looking at some data or a report around a product, and you're looking at that and you're going, why is that? And it's that curiosity, going back to that curiosity, to just nurture that type of thinking, right? Listen to that inner voice a little bit and go, when that why pops up, okay, well, take a second, reflect, don't automatically push it out the way, and maybe allow that a little bit of space to evolve into something, and then say, is this something I'm interested in or not? Again, is it valuable? Is it not valuable? Is there any data to see? Is it worth pursuing and going down that route? And what kind of exercises? I think just doing those sort of things, like being, going back to that why thing, getting into the why space and allowing that to nurture is probably the thing that jumps to mind. But then also giving yourself that opportunity, if something comes up, to drive it, be persevering, get people on board, sell it, be that innovator, try something out. If you don't try and you never fail, you'll never know if you succeed. And I think that's a really important part of that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Okay. We have another question from Christina. Yeah. And Christina asks, how would you support teammates that have rebel side, especially in an organization that isn't used to it?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So this is a really, again, these are all great questions. So I think, coming back to what we said about before, those four things, like the thing that I found with people similarly to me that are rebellious is that those things drive them a little bit. So then I think if you're managing someone, you're in a team with someone that's quite got those traits, you need to satisfy them, right? You need to allow them to satisfy those sort of natural urges that they have towards that type of thinking. So even if your organization is more traditional or it struggles with those things, you can still create them within an environment. And I think it's about looking at that environment and creating that opportunity for that person to then drive into those things of curiosity. And sometimes that can be done in a bit more of a controlled manner, so setting some clear boundaries and scope on things. But then also, if you have that person and they can drive it, use that as a case study to the organization to show why this type of thinking is really valuable.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I feel like everything ties back. Super lovely. So Diana has a question, and this is going to be the last one because unfortunately we're running out of time. Diana asks, what would your... Actually, we have just one more that's not anonymous, so maybe we do the two of them.
No worries, yeah.
Okay, so Diana asks, what would your life be without Rebel?
Okay, yeah. I don't know who I'd be, because I've always been rebellious, even like from a young age. I've always tried to do things differently. I think I wouldn't be me, right? I wouldn't be me. That's one of the uniquenesses about myself. But even though I'm a rebel, I'm a huge team player. I love working with teams and being around teams. So I think I would still be great, but that side of me drives me to do things outside of work. I love rock climbing, mountaineering, anything outdoors with a slight edge of danger I'm all over it. So that's where I get to expel my rebellious side as well.
Lovely. I can tell you I totally resonate with this entire presentation so far. Yeah, the mountain part even more. So yeah, beautiful. So let's take the last question from Utkarsh. What if the reporting manager feels a little offended with the approach? Maybe not all will be comfortable.
Yeah, this is a really good question and a great one to end on, right? Someone once said to me something that resonated with me through the rest of my career, which is not everyone will like what you are doing, right? But that's not to say that you can't try and take them on the journey. And I think the reality of it is that we are all different. We all act differently. We all have different controls over our emotions and how we feel about things. Being offended is an emotional response to something, right? To an input. And I think the reality of that means that if you know your stakeholders really well, you can then sort of start to create a strategy around how you manage those things. So very clearly, if you've got a manager that gets offended by challenging the status quo, think about how you can maybe utilize other people or bring that person on board to the thinking in a way that allows you to reduce that emotional response to things. And allow you then to push forwards with these things. But then if that doesn't work and you're doing the right thing and everyone else thinks that, then you also can just sort of think, well, no, I'm going to carry on and do this. And, I'm going to drive that outcome anyway. But better to take people with you.
Yeah. And the collaboration, I think alignment communication is a big piece of all of this. Massively. Too. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Andrew. This was absolutely inspiring, and I just want to say that again, felt like a TED talk, absolutely beginning to end. So thank you so much for preparing that for us.
No, thank you.
Super inspiring.